Hey everyone, my name is Dave and welcome to the NTDRacing Speed Shop, where today we're building a roll cage for this build, which we call Trooper. This is a 1973 VW Bug. We're converting it to a Class 11 racer, and in about a month and a half we're going to be in Las Vegas trying to race this thing in a thing called the Mint 400 with a couple of our other vehicles also. So there's not a lot of time to complete this build, so we're taking every advantage with every amazing tool that we possibly can. So in the last video I took all the dimensions to put this into the BendTech software, and then today we're dropping that in a Dragon Cam and we're going to cut this out, and by the end of the day we're going to have a roll cage on this. It's going to happen that quickly, so you'll see how amazing that machine is. But for those of you who've been following along with this build, let me give you a quick walk around so you can see the progress of what we got going on so far and some of the parts that we have on or we're going to be putting on the vehicle. But first, let me hit you up for the like and subscribe part of this thing. And most importantly, if you can activate the notifications, that is the only way you're guaranteed to ever see another one of our videos if you're interested in this build, is going on and ringing that bell for notification of future episodes. Let's go ahead and take a look at this build before we hop on the computer. Like I said, if you've been following along, here's some of the build stuff that we've been doing. A video of the trailing arms, I think, should be coming out here pretty soon. We got the beam, the torsion housing adjuster in there, and that's working pretty good. I think it's set pretty good for a ride height right now. I do have to build a limiter for this thing. I got an idea on how I'm going to limit the down travel. And a lot of guys say that the up travel, they just wait till it hits the wheel wells and the tires kind of control the up travel. As far as the front of the vehicle, the beam was just a lot of work to get this thing, to basically go back on there the way it is in the Class 11. And I didn't want to make a video because I just didn't feel like I was going to be the pro or talk as well as I could about this like other people can. I did do the adjustment of the springs inside there to give us more ride height. I also did these limiters. I was watching the guys from Wings World. They make such great videos. And I didn't have time to go find and order this, so I just kind of made my own on my plasma table. But you can kind of see that as the suspension goes through travel and this arm rotates, this piece strikes right there and it stops it. And as it goes through extension, I guess, it's going to hit right there and limit the downstroke. And so these things are limited basically on the way down by the ball joints and on the way up by the King shock. And then just looking at some of the cool stuff. One of my favorite parts of the build is just getting all the new parts going on, clean stuff. We're getting past the rust. Now we're getting to clean parts. We have our King shocks. Thank you to Filthy Motorsports for helping us get those. We got some new fuel tanks, rugged radio. These guys, so far their customer service has been amazing. I cannot wait to get their stuff in there. We're putting rugged radios in Trooper. We're also putting rugged radios in Ghost over there, which will also be at the Mint 400. I also have a video for me cutting the tubes for this thing on the Dragon 8250. So if you want to watch that, good information no matter what kind of side-by-side or vehicle you're working on. And then our tires. I cannot wait to get these Milestar Patagonia All-Terrain Pros on the vehicle. They're huge compared to the normal Bug tires. These are the wheels that we're using. They don't look amazing, but once you hit them with a wire wheel and some rattle can, those things are going to look really good on there. And then the next video or two, I think Friday, I'm shooting the paint with the Harbor Freight paint booth that we put together. And you'll just have to wait to see what colors we're putting on this thing. It's going to look pretty awesome. So this is where we left off on the last video. We had all of the parts and we already kind of set our cut order. Now I went back in and I changed a few things. I changed this front tube right here, which we're not cutting today. I just needed to cut these other tubes in relation to it. I changed that by 1/2 inch bigger in diameter because we put those brackets on there, and so it needs to account for that as we put those on there. I also changed this one back here because I wanted this tube to land at the top of that tube. It'll make it easier to weld and also clear some of the body parts, or at least the pan parts on the VW Bug a little bit better. Besides that, I also changed some cut order here such that this would be the last tube to go in. So to go this tube in first, this one second to locate this one, and this one will go in last, just in case I can't put that one in as I'm putting the body in. Anyway, those are the changes that we did. So in case you were interested, and you're not going to go back to the other video on how we did the cut order type stuff, basically, let's say I wanted to cut this tube, and in this scenario, this tube right here is going to be cut in relation to this tube only. I could go to cutting, I could say new cut, and I just say cut that tube in relation to this one and all the things that it might touch. And then once I say complete, it'll make that cut. I'm going to go ahead and escape out of that. All right, and just to kind of give you an example of how complex this can get is if I go over here and I say, hey, what's this part over here? That's part number 10. And then if I go over to the cutting tab and I show you part 10, you can kind of see that that tube is going to be the last tube to go in, and all of these other 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 or 5 different ends will kind of come together at this one junction point. And you can kind of see as I scroll into this, you can even see it's going to show you the profile that it's going to leave from the plasma cutter. So really cool. You'll see how that whole thing goes together. And you also might see that once you bring this one in and you do a weld across there, you might have a little bit of issue where you got to grind just a little bit of this one off to have it fit in there perfectly, because these things will fit in totally perfect. So that's as far as the tubes and the cutting. There's one more thing that you need to kind of be concerned with, or at least I do, and I think you do too, depending on what kind of bender you have, is the bend order. So this is going to send this over to drag and cam, or you're just going to cut it in your own shop and those kinds of things. And like for a part like this, let me see, I'm going to go to parts. And this one right here, which is my part number 3, if I go to part details, what I can do is go over to part details and bend order. And then now I can kind of see, well, how is this thing going to go through my bender? As I hit play, you can kind of see this is the bend order and how it expects me to bend it. And in this case, it's going to flip up and it's going to bend, and that will work in my bender. But let's say I reverse the bend order or something like that, and I hit play again. What you'll see is that as we get down to that last bend, I wouldn't be able to do this in my machine because it's going to drive it into the floor and into the stand for my machine. So I can just go ahead and flip that order, and then it'll basically bend it such that I can do it inside of my shop without any problems. And I might have to work. We'll see if it hits the ceiling here when I do that bend right there. I might have to roll my bender outside or something like that. But at least mechanically with my machine, that will work. So I'm going to cancel all of that. Close this window. I don't want to save that part. All right, so cool. So now everything is ready to go over to drag and cam. But before I do that, I want to actually open up the cam, and I want to make sure that like all of the things when I nest it are ready to go on the machine. So I'm going to go to machine library. In this case, I select Dragon on mine, and I'm going to go over to, first I have some tools. So, and I'm going to show you this here in a second, but on the plasma cutter, you got the plasma cutter, you got a marker, and you also have an engraving tool. And you can kind of set up all of those parameters on this one. But over in actions, what I wanted to do is when it starts to process the tube, the first thing I wanted to do is I want to mark the tube. I want to write down the number of the tube and all that kind of stuff and all the bend directions. And then over here, what I want to do is obviously cut wherever there's a cut. And then I set over here, I set it to engrave saddles. And what that is that's going to put a mark on each tube where another tube lands on it. And that is super helpful when you're trying to find the center, and you're trying to basically jig this whole thing up, and you got 3, 4 hands working. Well, now you know exactly where that tube's going to land. And I put engrave in that because I actually wanted to make a little tiny mark in the tube such that I can go, because before I TIG weld, I'm going to go in over it with acetone. I'm going to clean that thing up. And since I've engraved it, that will stay in there. If I use the part with a pen, it would not stay there, and I would lose that. So I engrave those. And I don't think that hurts the quality of the tube too bad, or at least not something that I'm worried about as far as when I'm manufacturing the roll cage. Is it going to be compromising the roll cage? I just don't think so. So that is all ready to go. So this program is now ready to receive, the cam is ready to receive the CAD. All right, so anything that, so I've changed the names of these parts before they go in there just because I don't want it to write the word straight on all the tubes. I just changed it to 3, 4, 5 and that kind of thing. So any tube that I do not want it to send over to drag and cam, I'm going to go ahead and deselect that tube. There's an extra one over here. Besides that, it's going to send all of these. So from this part of the project, you got 2 options. One, you might manually cut all of these tubes, and we talked about tube number 10. And if you double click on number 10, it gives you a paper profile of what that cut is going to look like. So you go ahead and print that thing out. You cut this profile out, you wrap it around the tube, and you hand cut those. I got a whole video that shows you exactly how I did that for one entire truck, about 115 tubes or something like that. It takes a little while, but what we're doing today is we're going to go on a little bit faster process. We're going to go ahead and send this whole thing over to drag and cam. You have to be in some window other than parts. We're going to go over to transfer, and then we're going to go ahead and select drag and cam, and now it's going to send this whole project over to the drag and cam, where we'll use the Dragon A250 to cut these tubes out. All right, so now this showed up on Dragon Cam. You have all the parts over here, and we're gonna go ahead and make a new nest. And then we'll just kind of get a chance to verify that all those things that we put on there are gonna work. So again, my machine will take a tube no greater than 250 inches in length. Now the tubes I've got are like 270 or something like that, so I will have some extra on the other side. And then I have like 7 tubes, just because I wasn't sure exactly how many I would need, but I'm gonna go ahead and tell this is how many tubes I got, these are the lengths of the tubes, go ahead and nest them. And you can see I've only used 4 tubes. Again, this is why these things are amazing, because they tell you exactly how much you need, they do the most efficient cuts on there, and I'm building this roll cage for probably about $300, maybe even less than that, in tubing. So you can compare that to what you would pay probably $2,000 for a kit or something like that. So this thing really does pay for itself pretty quickly. So anyway, as I zoom in here, you can kind of see what I was talking about. It's going to make these marks right over here in permanent pen. This is telling me it's bend 1 at 39 degrees. And then you also see over here, this line right here, these are going to be engraved marks. And this is where other tubes will land. And this looks like maybe this is the this is the A pillar. This is where probably that tube is going to land. It just kind of goes right above your knees there, underneath the steering wheel. And then you got some other tubes in there also. And that's going to make that really, really handy. Anyway, now that we got that, what we can do is we can go over to the parts window. We've done this before, and we can select individual parts. For example, say maybe this one. And as we zoom in here, you see there's a little bit of space in here. We can say move that part. We can move it closer together just to kind of close that gap and maybe save us a little bit of tubes on the end, because tubes are expensive. So here we go. So I'll move these together, and you can also rotate those to make sure they're nested just a little bit more efficiently if you want to go through that. So this is now ready to go into the Dragon A250. Let's do a quick walk around as we get this thing set up, and I'll show you what the Dragon A250 is all about. Let's take a look at the Dragon, and I'll talk a little bit about our relationship with BendTech and how that's gone down. So I built my first truck. It was named Honcho. We took about 4 months to hand cut about 115 tubes or something like that. And then when I built our next truck named Lefty, it took us about 3 hours using a Dragon A400. This here is a Dragon A250, and this is all of the stuff that shows up on one pallet when you get one of these. And one of the options was to have a case for your computer. I think that's really important, because this whole computer and everything showed up, but it just kind of keeps it clean in there, because you can see any kind of shop, you're just gonna get dust all over the place. And everything else about this machine is just built for production. And that's all I'll say about it. You can just kind of see just this piece right here is 1/4-inch plate. It is so hefty. Looking at the head, this is the torch for the Power Max, the Hyperfirm Power Max 45 XP. Anyway, over here you can kind of see this is the pen and also the engraver. Those are pneumatically controlled, which is kind of cool. It takes my shop air, I split it off, part of it go into the Hypertherm, and then the other part goes in this control box, which sends all the signals for this whole thing and the air to those devices. Anyway, the way this thing is set up, and this is all tailorable for whatever you need in your own shop, but in my shop, all I could fit in here was the ability to take a 250-inch tube in there. And we're gonna go ahead and get this thing ready. I usually lubricate it before every cut, and maybe I keep it a little cleaner than most shops would have it, but it's just a nice looking machine. I just love the way it all goes together. It's so clean. You can see how the water system kind of goes all the way through and neatly into the head. It goes down the tube and then just flushes right out my garage. And you have all kinds of different options for water setups. I think it's really nice. As far as the tubes that we're cutting today, here are some 1.5-inch tubes. They are a 0.09 wall. And what we did to prepare these is we took some Dawn soap and some Scotch-Brites. We cleaned these tubes all up, and they are now ready to take paint. And that's important, because I don't want it's easier to do as they're a full tube, but it also makes it such that it will take that grease pen and then it won't come off really easily. And then it'll also be engraving in there for this whole build. So anyway, let's go ahead and get this thing set up. It's snowy outside. We're gonna have some ice coming off this thing, but let's go ahead and start cutting the tubes for Trooper. All right, this is my favorite day. We just got our Milestar Patagonia all-terrains on here. Man, this thing's gonna look so cool. It's gonna be such a cool ride. Also, getting the first tubes into the vehicle. We got these off of the Dragon A250. It had a little bit of dross we had to knock out of there, and that's really a function of your cut speeds, and you can change all those things to dial that in, and there should be very little dross when you're all done. And again, that water going through there really helps with the heat affected zone. So what was the results? And this is, we got one tube, it's got 3 bends, it terminates over there at a hard point, and it terminates over here at a hard point, and it literally snapped right into place absolutely perfectly. Super impressed by the results there. Up here, you can kind of see I have these brackets. I just did a video that showed how I made these brackets using a press brake. I thought that was pretty cool. And then in the back, I got to do a little bit of work on the torsion tube. It's got the seam right here. I got to grind that down, clean that up, and get it ready to weld to. So what we're doing is we're getting all this stuff bent on our JD Squared Model 32 bender. What comes out of the Dragon A250 is this cross, which allows me to match it up with my bender, which I calibrated using their wizard on the Dragon cam. And it's telling me this is the first bend. It's going to 39 degrees, and that does account for the spring back also. So I'll go in here, I'm gonna line this tube up in here with that cross. You see this lateral line, I line it right up with that little notch there, the cut on the metal, dead centered. And then the radial line, I line it up with the face of this thing right here, and that's the way I calibrated it when I put that thing in there initially. We'll do the bend, 39 degrees, and when it's done, it'll probably come out 36 or something like that, maybe 35. I will take the tube over here to my bench, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these pieces of angle aluminum. I'm going to run them up against both sides of the tube. I'll use this angle finder, and then I'll start recording the results. Say, for example, this one, it said bend it to 15 degrees. I was looking for 12, and I got 12.2. So I'll take those numbers, and I'll go ahead and put that into the spring back table that is in the Dragon Cam, Dragon CAD, in the BendTech software. And this will keep track of all that, and it'll allow to create more and more accurate spring back predictions in this thing. And it's all about degrees. I think I'm hitting anywhere between about 0.2 degrees off. My worst so far has been 0.7 degrees off. That's pretty good, not perfect, and it'll keep getting better. Let's go ahead and bend this tube. All right, so here's a look at that resulted tube. I bent it to 39. We're shooting for 35, so the computer thinks that we need 4 degrees accounted for the spring back. So I run the pieces of angle aluminum, make sure they're flush with the tubes. Then I bring my angle finder up against those, and I kind of hold everything up against the tube. I make sure I get rid of the clearance between the 2 ends of these rulers here on this angle finder, and I get 34.4 degrees. So I basically have missed my 35 degrees by 0.6 degrees. So that's not too bad. We'll go ahead and drop those numbers back into the Dragon software, and it'll be better for the next project. Let's take a quick look at some of the progress here on Trooper. Getting it all tacked together. The pieces are just pretty much falling into place, which is really nice. I do have a Miller welder, but I'm using this Vulcan Pro TIG 205 from Harbor Freight. I just did a video on this, and I'm loving the welder. The only thing I would probably change, and I don't have one right now, is I would go with CK's torch. Right now I'm using the Vulcan one, which doesn't have a flexible head and also a stubby end there. So you kind of get in some of the tight spots. I might have to go to my Miller for some of the tight spots, like all the way back in there. Other than that, let's take a look at some of the things that we're doing to weld this thing up. If you look at the original design, it kind of has tubes going all the way through. The way we did that is I got a laser line I put across there to figure out where we had to drill some holes, and then we just ran these tubes all the way through. And I had these closeout plates, which I will basically weld around there and weld around there to kind of tie this thing into the strongest part of the VW Bug, which is that tunnel. Here's one of the issues though that I kind of see with that, and I'm going to have to change this, is it gets in the way of your hills here with the pedals. So I'm going to have to come up with a different plan for that, cut that out and put something in a little bit lower profile. But I will, I'll deal with that. And then just kind of the fitment, this thing is just really going together really well. You can just kind of see some of the joints here. You really can't even get your fingernail inside there, which is exactly what you want if you are TIG welding. And if you're MIG welding, it's just super easy to do this one. But really nice fitment all the way around. If it isn't fitting, you put it together wrong, is what I kind of found with this. Let's go ahead, continue welding this thing together. Okay, we're wrapping up this welding project, and I would tell you some of the welds here have just been some of the most difficult, just trying to get into some really difficult areas to weld from underneath and all that, trying to make 360-degree TIG welds. To help with that, on the Vulcan Pro TIG 205, I ended up going with this CK torch. I've been talking about it. And here's the benefit of this. This is like the one upgrade I think that this welder could use. It's a 25-foot lead, so you can take it anywhere around the vehicle and continue moving the welder. I ended up putting a gas lens, kind of a stubby kit on it there, and then the head. Well, the one that I ordered did not have a flexible head. I just swapped it out with one of my other CKs from over there. So now I've got a swap head over there. So now I can kind of maneuver it, and it helps me get into some really tight spots. So we got a couple more of those tight spots to do. And then hopefully this project will be done, at least as far as the tough roll cage welding. I think I used to say that if it wasn't blue, I wasn't going to have it in my shop. I was like a welding snob, all Miller stuff, until I started using the Vulcan line of welders. And I'll just say it, the Pro TIG 205, the Omni Pro 220, amazing welders, and literally can replace the ones that I had purchased for a lot more money. I think about a little over $1,000 you can get into one of these. And I welded 90% of this thing up with just all of the stock stuff out of this. And then I added that CK torch to kind of get into some of the tight areas at the very end. A super capable welder at an amazing price. And then BendTech. You know, I don't know if the folks at BendTech ever watch my videos and see what we do with their product, but just let me say to the line workers there, the software engineers, the hardware engineers, just thank you for what you do. You know, it really kind of gives you confidence as a builder to make things, you know, a little bit more complex. I think increases the safety of our roll cages and those kinds of things. So thank you guys for doing that. And everything that I did here, you could do with the BendTech Pro software, which is really reasonably priced, and 2 angle grinders and maybe a printer so you can print out the templates. And then because of the amazing versatility of their software and hardware, you can scale it up to their SE software, their Dragon A250, Dragon A400, and I hear they got this amazing tube bender coming out, which I have plenty of room in the shop for, and I would love to up our game with one of those. We got really cool stuff coming up. We're gonna live stream this thing racing in about a month. If you don't hit the notification bell, you may not see it, because we're gonna blast that thing out right before the race, and you'll wanna get a notification on your phone that we are live streaming. So if you wouldn't mind hitting the notification bell below, and you will get notifications of every episode of us building these vehicles. And I can't wait to see you next week. Take care of yourself.